general fund. That one does have updates. So I'm thinking he's waiting to roll out the rest of it until after tonight's meeting.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, if you scroll down, you can...
Thank you for being with us tonight. This meeting has been brought to you in part by...
Let Grand Forks International Airport help you start your next vacation off on the right foot. Grand Forks International Airport offers flights to the sunny destinations of Orlando, Las Vegas, and Phoenix on Allegiant, and connections anywhere in the world through Minneapolis-St. Paul on Delta. Forget the hassle of long drives, parking nightmares, and stressful check-ins. The convenience of flying locally means less headaches and more time for you. Grand Forks International Airport. Your airport. Simply grand.
Know what's in this box? Well, in case your crystal ball is broken, here's a hint. Safe, reliable energy, for starters, but there's also a commitment to this community. See, at Excel Energy, this is our hometown. So we're not just about making a living here, we're about living here. Oh, I wish I had wings. In our community, we're always delivering. Excel Energy, responsible by nature.
Grand Forks. On Saturday, August 17th, feel the thrill of WWE Live with the Universal Champion.
The age of Rollins is here!
And we are going to burn it down!
See Seth Rollins collide with Baron Corbin for the Universal Championship, plus Braun Strowman battles Bobby Lashley one-on-one. It's WWE Live at Grand Forks on Saturday, August 17th. Tickets are available.
You get me.
Committee and the Grand Forks Library Board. Ms. Marshall, thank you for, I assume you'd like to
I would serve again.
serve again. That's great. Are there any concerns about the appointments to the Historic Preservation Commission? Moved by Mock. Is there a second by Marshall? Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 2.2, bids for project 8077, General L. Palmer Visitor Center. I see the bids for the L. Palmer Visitor Center came in significantly over the engineer's estimate, Mr. Walker. And so you've asked us to reject the bids and rebid in the fall. Is that accurate?
That is correct. We know that contractors are pretty busy right now. Most of them have their schedules filled up. We were asking that this project be constructed before, in time for to be completed by the end of the year. After we received the bids, which the lowest one was in excess of 50% higher than the engineer's estimate, we met with the veterans group and we decided that although it was desirable to have the facilities built this year, it would be best if we rebid it next year, bid it in the beginning of the construction season, probably January, February sometime, and then allow all 2020 for construction. And we might get some better prices. It would also give us the opportunity to meet with the bidders and evaluate some of the features of the building, and maybe there's some opportunities to save if we were to make some changes to the plan. So that's our recommendation.
Very good, Mr. Walker. Thank you. Any thoughts or comments? Mr. Weigel moves we reject the bids. Is there a second? Second by Veen. Any other comments, Mr. Veen?
One comment, I mentioned this to Mr. Grasser today. As we move forward with this project, which is just an excellent project for the community and for the city here, I would ask you maybe to reach out. Garrison Diversion Conservancy District has a recreational grant program, and they do that for those counties within the district, which Grand Forks is, and they make monies available for projects similar to this. I see the city of Bismarck, for a project that was just awarded, got $100,000 out of that. So you may want to look, and I said I can help a little bit with that too, at putting together a grant for either this component or additional components as it goes forward.
I will certainly pass that on to the veterans group, and I'm sure that they would be most appreciative of that. So, thank you.
Great. Any other comments? Seeing none, there's a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 2.3. Bids for Project 7906, District 554, Stormwater Pond for Opportunity Park First Re-Subdivision. Mr. Krako, good evening.
Good evening, President Sandy and members of the council. So we took bids on this project on last week, Monday the 15th. We got a total of 5 bids. The low bids on this one actually came out to be from our Schedule B, which separated our general work from the electrical work. And that was, the low bidder on that one was R.J. Zavril for the general work and Integrated Process Solutions for the electrical work. In addition to that, we'd be also looking to seek approval on using economic development funds to fund 30% of the pump station, which is estimated to be approximately $133,000. Beyond that, the bids came in about 1% above the engineer's estimate, so very close.
Very good. Any questions or comments?
Moved.
Moved by Marshall. There's second by Mock. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. By the way, it's nice to have everyone in the room for the first time in what seems like several months. Item 2.4, plans and specs for Project 8061, 62, 63, and 64 sanitary water main storm pond for Edgewood Village First Re-Subdivision. Mr. Kranko.
All right, Edgewood Village First Re-Subdivision. It's located north of 47th Avenue and west of South Washington Street, just west of the Drainway. These plans and specs address the utilities as well as the pond for Edgewood Village First, which is proposed to be constructed under a 3-way agreement, which is where the developer would end up hiring the contractor directly to do the work, and then the city would inspect the work. This case, though, I believe we also have the developer is hiring the engineering to cover that as well. So this is for approval of plans and specs, and staff is recommending approval.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Krinko. Any questions, comments about the plan? Moved by Weigel, second by Marshall. Seeing no other comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 2.5, cost participation maintenance agreement for project 7950 shared use path on 17th Avenue South from South 20th Street to South 25th Street. Again, Mr. Krinko.
All right, this project is for a shared use path right in front of Red River High School. We got funding through the Transportation Alternatives Program. We originally ended up requesting about $280,000. We received notification that we got funding in right around $205,000, and because some funds were turned back, that was increased to about $214-ish thousand. This is our common agreement with NDDOT for the cost participation maintenance agreement, and staff is recommending approval.
Any questions about the bike path, Mr. Weber?
Just a quick question on the design fees or design services. Is this something that could have been done in-house?
Typically, this is something we would have done in-house. Unfortunately, because of staffing at the time, weren't able to complete that.
Hate to be a broken record on that, but it's just worth pointing out. I'll move approval.
Moved by Weber, second by Veen. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Krinko, item 26, status of the last STIP request, information only.
So as you may remember, last fall and into the winter, we ended up putting forward a number of requests for federal funds, whether it was through the Urban Grant Program, the Urban Roads Program, the Regional Roads Program, Highway Safety Improvement Program, or the Transportation Alternatives Program. We ended up getting a draft STIP from the DOT, which kind of indicates which projects were getting funding and that sort of thing. We did get notification that a number of these projects were included in that draft STIP. However, there were some that were also not included that we had requested. Some of those projects include rehabilitation of the North Columbia Road overpass. That was a project that we weren't sure if there was going to be enough funding available for that, so that wasn't entirely unexpected. Staff is thinking that we'd put that forward for this next cycle or this next request. A couple of the other projects, the environmental documentation for addressing the congestion at 32nd Avenue, which likely would have resulted in a interchange at 47th Avenue South, as well as the construction for addressing that congestion on 32nd. Neither of those projects were included in the draft STIP. And given the timelines that are associated with that, that'll probably lead to discussions later on as to the possibility of an interchange at 47th Avenue South. The other project that was not included was a regional roads project on Washington Street to reconstruct from 8th Avenue South to Hammerling. And that's likely also because of available funds.
Very good. Any comments about the transportation plans? Yes, Mr. Weigel.
One thing when I opened this up the other day and that I didn't see in was there was nothing about an underpass or overpass at 42nd and Demers. Why is that?
We put this together last fall, and if memory serves, when it came to one of those larger projects, we pretty much had to pick one. We wouldn't have enough funding to pick all three of them. And so I believe that one was the one that was selected to move forward because of development that continues to move south. And if we don't make some movement on this one at that point in time, that we might not be able to, or it might become even more complicated.
When we talk about congestion, have you driven at about 7:50 in the morning at 42nd and Demers when there's a 25-minute train going through?
Been there once or twice.
It happens to me all the time. It's not only an issue for people that live on the north end or are commuting to the north end, to UND, which is one of our largest employers in the city, but it's also an issue for public safety, for police officers that may be on the southwest corner of town responding to an emergency call, or for, we've got one fire station on the north end of town, which is Station 2. Anything coming from the south will have to divert to Washington or Columbia. we need to make this a priority. And I think it's more of a priority than a $37 million interchange at 47th Avenue South and I-29. I think we should take care of our issues inside of our city versus looking at continuing to expand farther and farther south.
Council President Sandy and Councilmember White, I think that's a good point. And when we start I think that'll start soon as part of the budget, because you're going to note on one of the budget slides that two projects that are not incorporated right now into, I'll call it our infrastructure plan, is the 42nd Street underpass or overpass and the 47th Avenue interchange from a financial point of view. But we also talked earlier about Merrifield Road versus an intercity bridge, and I think we're at the point of the City Council setting the priorities, both on that bridge. What do we want to move forward with to the state legislature as part of a public-public partnership? And I think on those two projects, I think we should focus our energy and really pick a priority, and so that we can work the solution and show that we have a united front, so that we're not kind of in between both projects. And so I think if we could start tonight as part of the budget of picking what those priorities are, and then as we lean towards the 21 legislative session, that we would have clear priorities from an infrastructure perspective, especially now that we're not going to go back for a water treatment plant funding. We're going to have that out of the way, and probably what is the next large regional project or projects that we want to really fight for.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Very good. Thank you, Mr. Krinko. Appreciate the update. Last item on the agenda tonight, 2020 Mayor's Budget Presentation related to special revenue funds, enterprise funds, and our capital improvement plan. Good evening, distinguished mayor.
Good evening, good evening. So my main budget focus on the budget this year is the 5 pillars of the Grand Forks Promise that we reviewed the budget last week. So it incorporates these key points: protect and serve, invest in infrastructure, promote growth and quality of life at an affordable rate, and a commitment to our youth. And the main takeaway points I want to leave with you tonight is no increase in property tax, very minimal increase in utility rates of 1.63%, continue to invest in our public safety, significant investments in our infrastructure, and we've done this all at an affordable rate through good planning. So a job well done to all our department heads. And the city of Grand Forks is still a great place to live, learn, work, play, and stay. And I appreciate of the initiative and thoughts of our city department staff, city council members. Thank you for your input, city strategic and collaborative partners, and citizens in crafting this budget. And Finance Director Maureen Storsett will now help lead a discussion this evening on the 2020 fiscal year budget. And the city administrator and city department are available this evening to answer questions. So with that, Maureen, it's yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, President Sandy, members of the council. Tonight we bring to you the Mayor's fiscal year 2020 budget as a continuation from last week's discussion. You do have copies of your budget presentation and a handout in the inside pocket of your budget binders, which will show you the budget that I'm about to present to you in much greater detail. And it's also electronically posted to the website. But tonight we're going to cover special revenue funds, enterprise funds, CIP, and finally we're going to sum it all up for you in one package. Ultimately, as the mayor said, this budget recommends no increase in property tax, minimal impact of 1.63% on the average utility bill. This is 48 pages, I believe, slides. I'm going to try to go through as quickly as I can, but still give you the substance that you need as you're reviewing your budget binders before we come to you for preliminary approval. So as I stated, we're going to go through the special revenue funds, enterprise funds, followed by the different parts of the CIP, the capital improvement plan, and we will go through a few summary slides and then go through with you the next steps. Last week, if you remember, we showed you this pie chart that breaks down the general fund, which is very much people-driven, with the largest portion of that people side coming from public safety. So this week, we just show you all the non-general fund positions and how that breaks down, and you'll see a much different story where the largest component as you look at the budget in total is your capital outlay from your capital projects. The first category of funds that I'll address are the special revenue funds. These funds are used to account for proceeds of specific revenues for a specific purpose. All these funds are in detail, as I said, in your budget binders, and I won't go through all of these tonight, but we'll hit the highlights. Beginning with the Loan and Stabilization Fund, which is a very important fund as its purpose is to stabilize taxes. In 2020, we look to use these funds toward phone and equipment needs of the city of $180,000 and also a small transfer to our insurance reserve fund. The PSAP fund, Public Safety Answering Point, is our Fund 2104, and this accounts for the operations of the E911 Center. The city's general fund, as you saw last week, currently pays about $896,000 budgeted for 2020, and this is approximately 61% of its total operational cost. We are working on an agreement with Ultra regarding a cost share. This has been approved by the PSAP board with Mr. Weigel being the point person on this, so thank you, and Todd has been working on his behalf. PSAP, if I could also add, just looks to maintain system operations through the SIREN project, which stands for Statewide Interoperable Radio Network. And you're going to see in a little bit here in the presentation how we're going to utilize some of those Prairie Dog funds for those costs. The library board is asking for mills to stay level. They have projected $241,000 for building upgrades from existing budget dollars, and they still have set aside the bequest from Mr. Neal of, which is a balance of about $687,000, and are not recommending to spend this at this time. The City Special Assessment Fund, which is our Fund 2145, this is where we pay special assessments on city-owned property. No changes there. Our Insurance Reserve Fund is used to pay insurance premiums on general liability. No change in mills here, but we do just include a small transfer from our Loan and Stabilization Fund into here. The Police Grant Fund decreases. If you remember last week, we talked about those 4 officers coming off of grant. You see a corresponding decrease in our police grant fund for those 4 officers that were in 2019 budget. They're housed in our police grant fund for the full 4 officers. Now these will fully be paid out of the general fund, which is a part of reason for the salary increase that you saw in our general fund. The city share increases in total just 25%, but the impact on the general fund is the full increase in salaries, and you see a decrease to general fund operational as through the grant match line item. But if you have questions about that, I can follow up with you on that. Fund 2175 was set up to record the street and water sales tax. The proceeds are recorded in this fund and then distributed to the other funds that we use for water and streets. We have kept that flat, as I had stated last week, with sales tax, which correlates to this as well. So we have kept that budget the same as 2019. A new fund in 2020 that we have set up is to record the Prairie Dog Infrastructure Fund dollars. We have put a number on that of 2178. We do anticipate to begin collections from these funds the last quarter of 2020. Included in your budget binder, this is, I believe, handout A in the inside left pocket of your binder. That shows how we anticipate to spend those funds. We look to use those for SIREN project, equipment and radio related expenses in our wastewater fund, pump station renewal replacement and bypass force main, and the remaining or the bulk of collections we're looking to put into our street infrastructure fund. As was presented last week with the general fund, the mayor is recommending a change in allocation of the 1% general sales tax to put a little less toward economic development and a little more toward property tax relief, which is the general fund. We feel we can make this change without negatively impacting our economic development efforts. In total, the transfers from economic development to our JDA, which is our Fund 5996, have been decreased by an approximate $200,000 annually, which corresponds with that decreased allocation from sales tax. Also included in our economic development fund is a portion of the welcoming coordinator, with the other 25% share coming from the outside city. And also we have 25% toward brick coordinator. And those two are housed in 5996 and as a transfer from our economic development fund. We plan to set aside $340,000 toward downtown redevelopment, which is being targeted toward town square improvements, which is currently slated for 2021. A very large component that has become a part of the economic development efforts is using dollars for infrastructure, for getting land shovel ready for business development. Total included in 2020 for this purpose is $947,000. That comes with a split of $729,000 for transportation infrastructure for an area north of Simplot, and $218,000 is for utility infrastructure, which pays Bank of North Dakota loan and special assessments. We look to use the Economic Development Fund going forward in our 6-year projection of about $5.1 million for strategic infrastructure projects. The fund continues to contribute, as the slide points out, for the areas of contribution toward airbase, EDC, beautification, special events, and arts. The next few slides then will give you a snapshot of the major utility funds showing their cash balance, total projected revenue and expense, and finally any projected rate increases in each fund. Sanitation is estimated to begin with cash balance of $3.5 million, with other cash balances restricted for debt service and construction reserve. Revenue is projected at $11.2 million, with expenses projected at $11.1. Detailed list of all these rates can be found in the back of your binder under the supplemental tab. We continue to shift a portion of the rates per a cost of service study that was done a couple years ago. So you do see a 4% increase in single family, but a 4% decrease in multifamily residential to rebalance that. Listed here then is our highlights of the sanitation fund for 2020 and out years, and I'm not going to go through these in detail, but just projects that you should be aware of. Lee Ray is available for further questions today or through the next couple of weeks, and always as you have any questions on these projects. The wastewater fund is estimated to have $2.9 million at the start of 2020, with the revenue equivalent to expenses at about $12.1 million. No rate increases are recommended for 2020 for residential, with just 1% increase in commercial rates in our wastewater fund. It's important to note that the wastewater utility is an incredibly important enterprise for industry, with the wastewater treatment plant and infrastructure to support industries that are so important to our area. We're using prairie dog funds in the 6-year projection for, as I said, pump station renewal, as well as a bypass force main in 2021. We've done further analysis on rates from residential to commercial to industry, as you can see how that breaks down. Of this, that you can see the East Grand Forks share would be approximately $476,000. A joint meeting has been set up between Grand Forks and East Grand Forks for next Monday, the 29th, and that'll be held in East Grand Forks. Water is estimated to have a cash balance to begin 2020 of $0.9 million, which is below the targeted operational cash balance of $2.1. As with other utility funds listed on this slide are the cash balances and their use. We have construction reserve cash of $4.1 million in this fund. We do have a sales tax component now to help support the cost of the water treatment plant. We had projected larger increases if the sales tax had not passed, and projected with a 2.5% annual increase if there were a sales tax. So what this shows you is we're following our plan. In fact, we're a little bit better. We see the rate increase of 2% is what we're projecting here, and we have projected 1% commercial. We have $180,000 budgeted in 2020 for the Red River Valley Water Supply Project toward the 10% share for the biennium of the 2017-2019 period. All years, we do have larger amounts projected for future debt. Mr. Veen has been instrumental, a great contributor to the discussion on this project. Many details on this are yet to be worked out, and as we move forward, we'll give you more detail. The budget carries out the plan of a combination of rates and sales tax for the water utility. We will be asking the State Water Commission at their August 8th meeting for the additional $9.8 million needed based on the 50-50 cost share. We expect the water treatment plant to be fully complete and operational June of 2020. But we are on schedule and on budget. The last of the four major utilities is the Stormwater Fund. The beginning operating cash balance here, expected $1.7 million, with corresponding revenue and expense estimated at $3.7 million, a 3% rate increase for stormwater, 1.5% for flood protection greenway maintenance is being recommended here for this fund. The increase to this fund's expense is capital driven. For items including pump station rehabs, also we have discussed in the past at a policy level, we take on larger city share for ponds as a stormwater utility helps pay for growth as well as infill development. Maintenance of existing ponds also impacts this fund. Quick summary of mosquito control fund. We look to begin the year with $300,000 cash balance here with equal revenue and expense budgets of $1.1 million. Also, we have a capital reserve balance here of $75,000. We do not project a need for a rate increase in 2020 in this fund. As we wrap up the utility funds and their projected rate increases, we've put together this summary utility bill for 2020 as compared to 2019, inclusive of water, garbage, sewage, mosquito, stormwater, and flood protection greenway. The overall impact of the rate increases for the average 6,000 gallon a month user is shown here, which is estimated at $1.54 per month or 1.63% for 2020. This slide sums up the cash balance for our public transit fund, projected revenue and expense. We did just recently hear of approval of grant dollars for items requested, and as are included in the budget here with the 80-20 split. We do spend some cash down in here, but it is for capital needs and not ongoing operations. Public Transit added a new position through the 2019 budget process. The marketing specialist to date has secured more than $36,000 in additional revenue through advertising, and this is projected to grow to about $100,000. This position has more than paid for itself, and this position also manages existing contracts and promotes public transit services. Thanks to the Mayor and Council for approving this position. It's also important to note that the ridership has increased since route changes were put into place, and we continue to work with UND on integrating transportation systems services for the fall semester of 2020. We have a few slides for you in regards to Dial-A-Ride. The few slides will help show why the cash balance is low to begin the year and why we are making a change with its operations. Our projected revenue is $1.5 million and expense at $1.4 million. In looking at just a couple graphics here to put this into context, in looking at the contract cost per ride as well as the increasing ridership numbers for Dial-A-Ride, it's clear that costs were escalating and we needed to make a change sooner than later on this fund. City currently contracts with MV Transportation to provide drivers with a Dial-A-Ride service. With the cost per ride increasing each year along with increasing ridership, the 2020 service contract is estimated to exceed our revenues for Dial-A-Ride. Changes we've already made over the years, the city has taken more and more functions in-house in order to control costs and meet compliance, including city-owned vehicles, maintenance and dispatch. The 2020 budget includes a recommendation of hiring staff to operate the service entirely in-house. The results This results in a cost savings of more than $100,000. And this graphic will give you a good visual of the projected savings and costs for moving off the contract and moving these drivers in-house as the mayor's budget recommends. Moving on to the Alaris Center, it is the mission of the Alaris Center to provide premier entertainment and events that stimulate the economic impact and improve quality of life for Grand Forks area residents. Spectra and their team are working hard to accomplish this mission on our behalf. The budget for the Alaris Center includes a net profit of $140,000. The Alaris Center will strive toward even further goals, but the commission felt it important to pass a budget of the lesser net profit that was budgeted in 2019, knowing it's a challenge to fill the event load, but they continue to strive to do more. Capital is budgeted at $3.9 million, with $1.5 million being set aside toward the reserve for future capital. More detail of the CIP can be found in your budget binder. As suggested by Mr. Sandy last week, we do have loan forgiveness included in this budget, which would be a non-cash transaction. This slide will just give you a snapshot of the makeup of the budget numbers. You can also see a comparison of the event load from 2017 and forward. As stated on the previous slide, the event load will be a challenge, and Spectra will strive to go 425 and more. In our Job Development Authority Fund, Fund 5996, we've budgeted $3.1 million of rental income for 2020 and have included the sales of our Corporate Center 1 and 2. We are projecting the earliest possible sale date to take place in the fall of 2020 and uses the 2019 appraised value as the assumption. Projected rental income is then adjusted going forward in the projection that is included in your binder. It's important to note that the large percentage of the sale proceeds needs to be used for CDBG purposes, so the budget reflects this. It's a 36.42% budgeted as a transfer out of this fund and into CDBG, which is a portion of the increase that you see in the expenses. As noted earlier, speaking to the Economic Development Fund, approximately $200,000 less is coming into this fund annually than it has seen in previous years due to the shift in the sales tax allocation. I should say that sale date is open for a 2-year period, fall of 2020 to the fall of 2022. Moving on to municipal parking, a summary of the parking fund will show you a cash balance is maintained by keeping expense level with projected revenue. Of note, $50,000 is to be placed toward a capital reserve, and also a CSO, community service officer position, is paid out of here for the purpose of security and parking enforcement. An example of departments working together, and this is paid for out of savings from outside security funding. We put together this slide to give you an idea of how the CIP breaks down in total between utility infrastructure, buildings, streets and bike paths, and equipment, the largest components being streets and utility infrastructure. This will show you in total the amount, including state, federal, special assessment shares of the projects. A detailed CIP by category can be found in the CIP section of your budget binders. I'm not going to go into detail on this slide, but this does show categories of how street portion of the 0.5% sales tax and prairie dog funds will be spent. The CIP, as I stated, is included in your budget binder with great detail as to projects that are included in your 6-year CIP for your review. This slide will show you all sources of funds that go into the CIP. This pie chart gets quite busy, but the two largest sources for capital projects are coming from your street infrastructure fund and special assessments. As already stated, detail of projects are in your binder, but this puts you at a cash projection just looking at the beginning cash balance, your revenue expense, and your running ending cash balance. This does include and incorporate the additional 0.5% sales tax of about roughly $2.75 million annually, as well as prairie dog funds. Also of note, last week the question came up about MPO funding. This is the source of those funds for that. We have $75,000 budgeted in this regard. This will then give you a visual of road projects in our 6-year period. Funds are also planned to be used on other street maintenance projects, but aren't specifically identified at this time. But you can see that projects are spread throughout the city. Moving on to our flood protection CIP, or Fund 4154. This is the fund where you budget for your large capital project items for the flood protection system. You have a further breakdown in your binder, but this will show you a cash flow of what we expect to bring in revenue and spend on an annual basis with a running cash balance. I will just point out that the sales and use tax, we have a use tax that is dedicated for flood protection. That is related to a bond that gets paid off in 2021. So then you can see that those proceeds will come into this fund beginning in 2022 is when you see the revenue increase there from about 200-some thousand annually up to about 1.1 million. So the use tax will begin flowing into this fund for future capital, large capital maintenance related items for flood protection beginning in 2022. So finally, just a few slides to wrap up the mayor's budget document as a whole. This budget includes 0 property tax increase with an average overall utility rate increase of 1.63%. Looking to the history and what you as the mayor and council body have done in looking at that history, since 2000, it has been a reduction of 40.56 mills. Mills are a bit hard to understand, so I just jotted down some facts that might help you into how to quantify that. The total estimated to be collected in 2020 for all funds is 22.6 million, roughly. The total that would be collected if we had been collecting a total amount that would allow for growth plus inflation, we'd be collecting at this point 26.9 or about $27 million annually. That's a difference of about 4.3 million that we've taken less than the amount from growth plus inflation when you look at that time period. If you put that into percents, that means on an average, if we had collected the amount to cover growth plus inflation, it would have averaged 4.98%. What actually has happened is we've averaged annually 2.66%. So that'll help you just get a framework on how property tax and those mill cuts correlate. The mayor is including in his budget a recommendation as stated to change the allocation of the 1% general sales tax slightly with a shift decrease that goes to economic development fund and bring it into the general fund. And like I said, utility rates 1.63%. We showed you this last week, but we wanted to show it again to show that time period that I was referring to, that if your value goes up, it doesn't mean your tax is going up the same amount. So this is what I have shown for the same period. The left side shows the valuation increases in property. The right side shows the total mills that have been allocated. So you can see as the value went up, we've lowered mills over that same time period. We also showed this last week, but just to reiterate, your effective tax rate is just the rate of tax you pay on the market value of your home. The city portion there is the bar on the left of each year, 0.44%. If we were to show this back to 2012, before the state implemented a property tax credit program, The city's effective tax rate was 0.49%. They put the program into place of paying 12% of the tax bill, which brought us down to 0.44%. We further reduced when sales tax state aid were at a higher level, brought that down to 0.39%. That tax credit program is no longer in existence, but we're still able to maintain at the 0.44%. The mayor brings you a balanced budget with a 6-year outlook with the best information we know at this time. Public safety is an important component of this budget and accounts for 53% of the general fund, or $22.1 million, which is more than the property tax component alone that is collected for the general fund. We continue to bring planned use to reserve that has been set aside for fire operations. The budget does add personnel in the fire and police department, but once again, we're doing so without impacting property taxes. We continue to fund 5 SRO school resource officer positions, which funds 1 in each middle school and high school as we partner with the school district. We continue to use economic development funds in a way that helps fund the cost of infrastructure for a purpose of shovel-ready development. $5.1 million is included in the 6-year period for this purpose. Budget in total is a decrease of about $21 million. When looking at total numbers, I gave you a 3-year comparison there. 2018, all funds considered, $237 million. 2019, $210 million. The 2020 budget is $189 million. Primarily, the change is capital projects, particularly our water treatment plant. In conclusion, the mayor's 2020 recommended budget and 6-year plan is based on the focus to serve and protect, invest in infrastructure in our community, promote growth and quality of life, and do this all at an affordable rate. I do want to thank departments, finance staff, mayor, you mayor and council, citizens, as we work through this budget and previous budgets before that have led to this product. It truly is a collaborative effort with all involved, so I want to say thanks. Some dates coming up, we do look on August 5th to look toward a preliminary approval of the mayor's budget. We do need to notify the county by August 10th, the date, time, location of our public hearing, so the county can then do a mailing to all households with estimated tax statements on behalf of all taxing entities. They need to get those statements out by August 31st, and then our public hearing and final approval would be set for September 16th. I do want to just include one more, and I'm hoping this works, but we have included a budget page link for engagement and feedback. So if I click on here, it'll bring up that link. And for instance, if I click on general fund, it should bring up, first of all, it just says what the general fund is. If you go down, you can see a pie chart. Click on public safety, for instance, or any part of this pie chart, and you can see the breakdown of how those dollars are spent by function. So, and you can do the same. I'm not sure if it's all updated yet, but it will be within the next couple of days regarding utility bills, sales tax information. That will all be ready shortly. So, with that, I open it up for questions. Thank you.
Any questions? Yes, Ms. Marshall.
Yes, and you probably answered this when I was not able to attend last week's meeting, but I'm just wanting some clarification on the police officer personnel.
Okay.
There are 2 new positions incorporated in this budget, and then an additional 4 positions that were grant funded that are now moving into the general fund. Is that, can you explain that a little bit more?
Right. So the 4 grant positions that we hired on was in 2017, and there was a 25% share with those the first year, then that grows to 50% share, 75% share, and now fully funded in 2020. So the net effect is we're absorbing that final 25% share, but how it's accounted for in the budget is they were housed in Fund 2170, our police grant fund, with a match coming as a transfer, a match operational expense line item in our general fund to cover that 25, 50% share. And they were housed over here in our special revenue fund, or police grant fund. So now what I'm saying is with the 2020 budget, all four of them are now in the general fund. So if you just look at our salary expense line item, those four total come over into our general fund that weren't there a year ago. And the offsetting match that had before 75% of them. So you saw the operations and general fund go down a little bit because we won't have a match anymore. It's just that we'll just have the full amount of the salaries.
Okay, so
Does that help?
essentially we'll end up with the 4 positions continuing in the 2.
We still have the 4 positions. We've had them already. It's just now we'll be completely funding them.
And just funded in
Yeah.
different places. Thank you.
Right. Mhm.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Weber?
Competent, professional, transparent. It's understandable why Finance Department keeps winning
Thank
awards
you.
all the time. You went through this very quickly. That
Sorry.
was kind of you. Some of it went through a little bit quickly for me. Could you go back and cover some of the public transit issues?
Oh, yes.
I didn't understand quite everything that happened there. The marketing specialist, how he that position is paid for itself, and then also some of the what should be our takeaway on the dial-a-ride?
Okay. Well, starting with public transit, and if I need backup from Dale or Ally, they can help me out. But in 2019 budget, we hired a marketing specialist, knowing that there was room to bring in more revenue if we took that in-house instead of just a consultant line item. So we increased by that marketing specialist position for the sole purpose of getting more advertisement, more marketing of the service, and it has proven to generate, they're expecting in 2019 to generate an additional $100,000 just in those advertisement efforts and marketing.
Okay.
And do you want me to go on to dial-a-ride, or did you have further?
Yeah, dial-a-ride, if you
Okay.
could, please.
So dial-a-ride, we've discussed this for the past couple of years. You will see an increase in FTE allocation in dial-a-ride for this, but the decision was made as the contract prices were going up per ride for dial-a-ride services, and more people wanting to use that service. It was escalating costs that we can't maintain. Found that...
It sounds like if we keep bumping the charge and there's more and more customers, that should be good, but it wasn't sustainable?
When Ally Rue did an analysis of this, she did a very thorough analysis of looking at what we currently pay through contract services and versus just taking them in-house. It was a win-win. That we would look to save an estimated $100,000 by bringing that in, having more control, and bringing down that cost. So
Okay, so that's what we're doing. Instead of paying outside contractors...
you brought it in-house.
We're bringing it in-house.
Right.
Okay, wonderful.
You want to add anything to that?
And maybe just to clarify quickly, the cost per ride that you're seeing on the presentation is the cost per ride that the city is paying to the contractor. So throughout this history,
I misunderstood that
the
first
fare
time.
the fare that's being collected from the passenger has remained at $3, which is highly subsidized because just what we're paying to the contractor exceeds $14 per ride. Plus, we have administrative costs that the city allocates already in their 5,600 budget. So what's actually been escalating is the payment to the contractor.
Okay, thanks. And then, if I may, on, I think it was slide 37, maybe I'm doing something wrong here. The reallocation of 1% general sales tax to the general fund, is that supposed to be 2%?
So what I mean by that is there's a 1% city sales tax. That's a general sales tax, split three ways.
Right.
So for that 1% sales tax, I'm saying change the allocation with that 2% shift. So instead of economic development getting 20.5%, they'll only get 18.5% of that 1% share. Yeah.
Of the 1%.
Correct.
I see. Okay, very
Yes.
good. The reallocation of the 1%. And on slide 29, if I may. We note that the rental income, this is, if the sales go through as is anticipated, we would be experiencing some deep cuts in rental income.
Yes.
In the future.
Yes, so that, we'll have to update this as we go through this process. That sale date would be an option for a 2-year period. What we have in here is based on them taking advantage of that, the first availability of that open period of time. But yes, in the projection then, as you'll see, we would not have that annual rental income then going forward once that sale is made.
Right. And it's important, part of the budget here is to promote growth. And I understand the shifting from 20.5% down to 18.5% and the benefits of that. But that is not a 2% shift. That's nearly a 10% cut in the amount going to economic development. So I want to be careful about the language there, going from 20.5 to 18.5.
Yeah, it's
not
about
2%,
right.
it's nearly a 10% cut.
Correct. I believe, so they received about 1.9 to 2 million a year, so that would go down $195,000 to $200,000 a year.
Right.
Yes.
And if we want to promote growth, I'm just, as I say, I understand and support this cut, but we want to work against any further cuts. We're already cutting that by 10%. And then my final question, it's been brought up several times over the last months, the amount that the city is spending to outside contractors for engineering services. What are we doing with this budget to address that?
Well, I think that, we look to the markets by position, benchmark positions, and Tangi went through much of that last Monday with you, and there's an awful lot of market movement to account for those changes that were needed in the market, I think staffing is an overall, it's not easy getting the staff, not just engineering, but other departments as well. So I think it's an ongoing issue that will just, Human Resources has been really good to work through to try to find all possible solutions there. But the salary plan, including those market adjustments, is part of that solution.
And of course, this same problem is affecting other departments, not just engineering, but engineering is such a large part of what we do. And so we're just handling this as an HR matter, and we don't have any...
Yeah, because, it wouldn't help for me just to, increase another engineer in the budget, because we want to become fully staffed with what's already in the budget. So we need to, attract and retain, I think, so.
When we give preliminary approval, at that point, we can cut further, but we can't increase after that point. So it's worth, in our remaining time before August 5th when we give preliminary approval, perhaps we'd want to consider other possibilities, because this has been such an expensive problem for us over the last few years. All right.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
agree.
Ms. Mock, I think you were next.
Several questions have already been answered, but you mentioned the town square.
Yes.
And that 340,000, is that what we had in the beautification funds that we were somewhat designating towards town square, or is that coming from a different?
So it comes from when we satisfy that mortgage and that portion that's coming in we can use those payments coming in for the corporate center toward that effort. There's other beautification and downtown reserve balance in there. This 340,000 would add to that. There's a projection I can go through with you that shows in 2021 we look to utilize those funds for town square improvements, but there's going to be much more discussion on that before anything happens with it. So.
Are we anticipating that town square renovation to be about 340,000, or are we anticipating to pull in those other funds?
I don't have the total numbers on there, but I would assume it would be more than that. There's beautification funds that they would utilize that are in that fund of about 687,000, and there's 340,000 already set aside for downtown development reserve. I believe more to come from Meredith when they bring forward a plan regarding town square that will come to this body.
Okay, and we're...
I'm sorry, can you clarify where did that money come from that's listed in here as downtown development reserve?
So, make sure I'm correct on that.
It's page 201. And by the way, thank you on the presentation, having the page numbers at the bottom is incredibly helpful. Like somebody was really thinking ahead.
Yes. I thank my staff for that. So with that corporate center note that's paid off, and we're collecting rents on that, once that mortgage is satisfied and goes through the city attorney office to free up those funds, we are able to allocate that toward this. So that's where that's coming from.
So we're in general planning that town square budget to include this fund, the beautification fund.
Councilmember Mock, Council President Sandy, really what we're trying to do is that, and this is a policy decision, we're setting aside that increment that we're no longer satisfying those bonds, that 300 and some thousand. We're putting that into a downtown redevelopment fund, which we think should focus on the town square. And so really what we're trying to do this year and next year is to create a savings account as much as we can. And we think we can get in and around probably between $1.5 and $2 million in that account in anticipation of a renewal of the town square in 2021, what we're anticipating. The overall plan that you see, the visual that you see, is probably more than $2 million, so we may need to do some phased improvements on that. But at least by 2021, as we work with you as City Council between the end of this year and through 2020, we can come up with a strategic plan of how to actually move that forward. But for right now, we're setting aside money for that project as you move forward. The one project we've budgeted for in 2020 is, as you recall, we're doing Demers Avenue right now. Some of those key components to that, we're not eligible for DOT funding. Some of the lighting aspects of it, we have set aside $500,000 in the street infrastructure fund to complete that project. Some of the costs that weren't eligible as part of a DOT. So our plan is to complete Demers Avenue this year, finish off Demers Avenue with some of these lighting elements in 2020, and then look to 2021 to look to move forward with Town Square, and there'll be a lot more conversation on that. And then along the way, next year also, along with finishing Demers Avenue streetscape, we'll be doing 5th Street, we'll be doing University Avenue, and so we'll be doing primarily those things in 2020 and working with you as part of a broader plan in the downtown. And I mentioned Town Square a lot, but there's also some of those pocket parks, or as part of the park and open space, we should incorporate that. So for right now, we're just setting aside the money, knowing that there's a plan that needs to come back to you.
And part of our overall downtown plan has some of those lighting elements and things, I guess not set, but there's an overall plan for continuity with those different projects. Is that correct?
Yes, it should be integrated, and we have to integrate public art and all those different issues. So we're probably not going to have enough public money to do everything that we want. So we're also thinking about private contributions and other funds that we could do to move things forward. And it's going to have to be a phased plan. And when I think about a phased plan, it's probably a 5-year implementation plan. If you think of where we are today. But we've done an awful lot this year, and I would say it's probably another 3 to 4 years left over a phased period of time to complete all the elements.
So, with page 11, you went through the sanitation fund. Do we reevaluate annually how much single-family residential and multifamily residential costs for service? Is that why we see the change in the plus 4%?
I don't have the exact year. It was a few years ago that they had a study. We're due to have one in the next year or two to take another look at it. I don't have a projection for you right now regarding that, if there's any more balancing that needs to be done until we have that study.
But that was what was projected?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And then, for the water fund, you have budgeted the 10% for the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. Are we anticipating being approached for more funding for that? And if so, do we have a plan?
And I don't know, Mr. Bean, if you want to address this point.
That's quite complicated issue. It'd probably take about an hour to go through the possibilities, but it is in the midst of doing some contract negotiation and some planning. There is the $13 million that was planned to be spent this biennium, well, actually last biennium, which is being rolled over, which has a 10% cost share, which we're going to try to do internally. Anything beyond that is probably going to take a significant funding plan, long-term funding plan for us. It's going to be contingent on future legislation in the legislature. So that's something that we probably need to spend a little more time as we go forward. We're talking about contract negotiations now here in the next days, in fact, and would need to bring that back for, I guess, people to be informed of what's going on and a long-term approval of that. So this is an important first step, but the long-term plan is yet to be determined.
And then with those stormwater fees, you mentioned that part of that was driven by maintenance. Are we seeing normal maintenance schedules on those stormwater ponds, or are we seeing them needing to be cleaned out more frequently than anticipated?
As far as the details of the maintenance involved in those stormwater ponds, I may have to defer that to some of my counterparts. Maybe Alan would be able to, or Melanie.
Well, and if it's not a question for tonight,
No, that's okay.
An answer for tonight, that's.
I can pull the full dollars, but if you're looking for detail of what's actually done, I defer to Melanie.
Good evening. Actually, I think right now we've just mostly got just regular maintenance in there. I know we do have to do some dredging, and we've done some preliminary work in Lincoln Park. But those are usually balanced out for every 10 years or so is what we were anticipating, I think, is what's in the plan for now. So most of the costs are just tied to normal maintenance, landscaping, and cleaning them out.
So we are seeing a pretty normal, what you would anticipate as a normal maintenance
schedule for those. Yep.
Okay. And then the other kind of larger question I was wondering is how did we decide what to put in for the prairie dog funding, I guess, for anticipated revenue, and also those particular projects? Is there a reason we planned for those?
Ms. Mock, members of council, first of all, in regards to your question about how we projected the revenue that we're projecting in there, and that information is coming to us from the state with their projections, and I've held it flat. There is a growth factor, but to be conservative, we held that projection flat. The schedule that we were given, there's two different buckets that we're talking about. So in the biennium, and you don't receive anything till that bucket is filled. So when we're looking at this 2-year biennium, that first bucket would be projected to fill up the last quarter of 2020 for that $2.5 million base amount. And then the next bucket would come, that 9.5 million would then come the next following year. So that's how each biennium looks to be set up, and I've held that flat. As far as uses, we've talked with all departments about all the needs, and administratively, this is the conclusion we came up for in trying not to impact wastewater rates any more than we have to. Looking at our siren needs and communication infrastructure with radios and equipment seemed to be one of the top priority needs that we didn't have another funding source for. And then many needs in our streets infrastructure that we have just with many road projects is where the bulk of it went. And so those are the three areas we looked at.
Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Veen?
I think just to follow up to that question, on page 34, on the street infrastructure fund, you have the revenues, and my initial question, that does include the prairie dock, and you have the amounts per year, I think, on this handout.
Correct.
That would be included.
That's included in
What
this
are the other
cash flow,
funding
yes.
sources for the revenues?
For the street infrastructure fund? So when we referred before to the 1% general sales tax allocation, 30% of that goes toward infrastructure, which goes here. So that's coming from your 1% general sales tax. We just passed the 0.5% water street sales tax, so 2.75 million annually is coming in here from that source. Also, we had combined funds instead of having a separate infrastructure street fund and highway user fund. We combined them, so another revenue source in here is your highway, your gas tax.
Your gas tax.
Right. So you got the gas tax, the infrastructure sales tax, that street water sales tax, and prairie dog funds,
So
which
there's
comes
no
into here.
other federal funds in here?
Not that I'm showing in these numbers, I'm just showing our city share in projects. You're going to see federal portions in the detail of your CIP and your CIP section, but this is just dealing with the city's share of the cost.
The city share,
Yeah.
because that would be there.
Yeah.
Then on page 36, on the flood protection, your revenues start increasing significantly in 2022, and that's when the bond is paid off, is that right?
Yeah, and I should explain some of the, you have a detail of the projects, but some of the projects that are included in there are, for instance, erosion control, painting, things like that, that they will already start to spend money in 2020 there. The current revenue source till that use tax comes in there is coming from property that's been special assessed after the sale of all the flood protection bonds. It's coming into here to pay for future large capital maintenance needs of the flood protection system.
As you look at in the outer years, the fund does continue to grow. Do you think that's going to continue at that pace? Is there something we need to be thinking of down the road with funding?
As far as the needs, I would probably defer to Mark Walker. He's the one that helped put this together. It will have to be looked at annually. I think you're going to probably have more significant needs down the road that could be foreseen, just to make sure we're properly protected with the levee system. But I don't have the details out past 2025. You can see what the needs are projected in that time period. If it ever were to come to a point that you wouldn't want to dedicate the use of that use tax anymore, we'd have to have that discussion. So right now, it's a dedicated use for this purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Veen. Mr. Weigel? No comments? Ms. Thorstad, so seeing as we're on this slide, do we have any estimate what the total amount of special assessments, assuming we special assessed all the property that's inside our flood protection and the bonds are paid off, what's the number we're going to get to? Any idea?
So this currently brings in about $280,000 a year. When people get annexed, they do the same 20-year period that everybody else did for those bonds. So, as it's going to be a result of more property getting annexed, as property that was already annexed, gets their share paid off. So I don't have a complete forever cash flow of that at this time,
Sure, well,
but
we won't know because timing
But we'll
dictates when they.
continue to
when they get
manage that,
assessed.
yes.
But we don't even have a guess as to how much that would be if everyone were assessed today. If all the property was annexed today and everyone got assessed their flood protection. how
I
much
will
is it?
get you that number.
I'd like to know, well, simply because, assuming we can keep that revenue into this fund, hopefully it will have enough so that it generates enough revenue annually to manage all the flood protection and we don't have to go back to people looking for more money in the future. That would be great, in a perfect world. And I'd like to reiterate something Mr. Weber said earlier. Our economic development funds are very important, and they're very important for lots of things. And I really appreciate how we've been planning and using funds for strategic infrastructure growth. I think that's very good for our community and setting us up for future development. So I think that's great. I did want to point out that the $9.8 million to finalize the 50-50 split on our wastewater treatment plant probably still is one of the most important things that our community has going right now. And thank you, Mr. Veen, for your leadership on that. I think that is much more important today than any funding for the city provides for the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, and at least should take precedence over any other funding related to water. I certainly hope that the State Water Commission upholds its end of the bargain and helps us get to 50-50 cost share. Do we have any idea at what point we're going to stop adding police officers to our community? I mean, at least in the near term?
Well, Mr. President Sandy, members of council, if you remember, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, you were presented with a public safety master plan, that the goal was to get to 92 sworn positions. This puts us at 92 sworn positions. So at this point, we've hit that mark. You know, I can't say what the future brings, but that we have finally attained the 92 sworn position level.
Very good.
And if I hadn't said it before, I can't remember if I reiterated this, but with the water fund, with the 9.8 million, we will be making a request at the August 8th Water Commission meeting. So.
My only other question was the 25% funding for the brick coordinator. Who's funding the other 75%? Is the county still funding that? I thought the brick coordinator resides downstairs now.
There's going to be a shift in 2020, a proposed shift, Council President Sandy. So currently, right now, the city of Grand Forks pays 30% of Tom Ford's salary, who's the Director of Administration for Grand Forks County. And so the shift will be that Tom Ford will be 100% funded by Grand Forks County, and that the city will take over the coordination of brick and administrative support. And so Spencer Halverson, who's been assisting us in the mayor and city administrator's office, we've allocated 25% of his duties to that.
Got it.
To that. So we're kind of allocating him to his certain functions, and I think it'll be good that the city will help coordinate that. Tom will be the full-time director of administration. We'll help support it.
Great. Any other comments or thoughts? Ms. Dorset, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Very, very good information. I hope anyone paying attention gets the opportunity to go online to the budget section, see what the city is up to. I agree with what Mr. Weber said earlier about doing everything we can to be as transparent as we can, making sure people understand. Any other comments for the good of the order? Our motion to adjourn. Mr. Weber moves, second by Mock. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Hey, thanks for that backup.
You got a couple, if not several?
As in minutes? Yes. Yes, I do.
right.
Do you want to just sit up here, or do you?
Whatever works for you.
You can just sit.
All right. Actually, it's probably going to be really loud.
Thank you for being with us tonight. This meeting has been brought to you in part by
Let Grand Forks International Airport help you start your next vacation off on the right foot. Grand Forks International Airport offers flights to the sunny destinations of Orlando, Las Vegas, and Phoenix on Allegiant, and connections anywhere in the world through Minneapolis-St. Paul on Delta. Forget the hassle of long drives, parking nightmares, and stressful check-ins. The convenience of flying locally means less headaches and more time for you. Grand Forks International Airport, your airport, simply grand.
Know what's in this box? Well, in case your crystal ball is broken, here's a hint. Safe, reliable energy, for starters, but there's also a commitment to this community. See, at Excel Energy, this is our hometown. So we're not just about making a living here, we're about living here. Oh, I wish I had wings.
In our community, we're always delivering. Excel Energy, responsible by nature.
Grand Forks. On Saturday, August 17th, feel the thrill of WWE Live with the Universal Champion.
The age of Rollins is here.
And we are going to burn it down!
See Seth Rollins collide with Baron Corbin for the Universal Championship, plus Braun Strowman battles Bobby Lashley one-on-one. It's WWE Live at Grand Forks on Saturday, August 17th. Tickets are available.